we're very happy to tell you some news. In these kinds of conferences, one of the things that can happen is you can wonder if anybody's paying any attention and if it really matters. And we have some good news that that's not the case here, that this work is having some impact. This morning, if you go to the Washington Post website, you're going to see an op-ed that talks about the focus on adolescents, and particularly middle schools, as a critical time and a time when we need to be focused on capability rather than problems. And about this persistent prejudice and calling it a bias as persistent, to try and label it as something that we got to get over, that it's not about the problems of adolescence, it's that we, for some reason, despite the evidence, insist on misunderstanding them. And we're making progress, but I got to point out to you, if you look at the title, they still can't get away without calling them difficult. But that means our work is, we've got more work to do. But this is a compliment to all of you that we're starting to make some dents. Also, I wanted to note we have a number of organizations who are participating as part of this, and we're going to start to make links to those organizations and ask you to link to them on your web pages. Because as we saw yesterday, social networks and connections are very important, whether they're neural or social. So we want to encourage that. And I want to acknowledge in particular the National Forum to Accelerate Middle Grades Reform. There are about 30 members here, and they're led by Executive Director Debbie Kasak, and Debbie's going to be on the wrap-up panel with us. And here's why I want to point this out. So when we called Debbie to ask her if she would be willing to do this, she said, well, actually, we're having our meeting that day. And then she said, how about if we have our meeting at your meeting? And I was like, great, you know, and that's what she did, and she found a way to do that. So that's an action of really trying to move. This forum is made up of key players and policymakers and major organizations, and it promotes academic performance and healthy development of young adolescents. In other words, it's the place, it's the forum, it's the action opportunity for those of us who want to connect our research to practice, and where there's a persistent focus on trying to move towards the appropriate understanding of adolescents as capable and engaged in their learning. We have 3 panels today. We have focus on connecting families and schools and connecting communities, and then I'm going to blank. This is why I shouldn't operate from memory. This is probably more than I should tell you, but my wife and I were having a discussion this morning about whose memory was worse. So, and at least that's what I remember. So partnering with families and schools is the first panel, and then we're going to have a panel on connecting to communities. And then at the end, we're going to have a full discussion with people who are going to talk a bit about their reactions to the meeting and their thinking, but they're really to try to come to a kind of set of ideas that we're going to put into writing and on webs, but also hopefully will lead to action. So Sara Rimm-Kaufman, who's a faculty member here and associated with the center, is going to chair this panel. I'll let her introduce it.
Good morning. I had to do that. I just love it. I appreciate the opportunity to chair this morning's session, and I'm excited to hear from our speakers. I'd like to begin quickly this morning by commenting on some of the challenge of middle school family involvement. And could you, this, oh yes, okay. So I just a moment. Which one? Do I aim it in a particular direction? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I just went the wrong way, so I might be able to go the right way. This one. Yes, that's right. Okay. I'd like to begin by commenting on the challenge of family involvement for families with adolescents in middle school, and point out that there are certain parent responsibilities that do get balanced with the emerging characteristics in adolescence. The parent responsibilities being relational and emotional support for the children, monitoring, communication with schools, participation in the school-based programming, responsibility for learning outcomes. And that needs to be balanced with children signaling their drive for independence, children having an increase in their cognitive abilities, and also an expansion of children's social networks. I wanted to describe this in a way that would make us laugh. It's Friday morning. We're about to start a day of learning together, and I thought I would bring a cartoon that my my then middle school son drew. What I like about this cartoon is not only does it point out the obvious that the Cyclops is rolling his eye at his mother, but it also points out the increased cognitive ability of a child to realize that this is funny, and it would be funny to them, and it would be funny to other people too. Okay, so now I turn to our speakers. I'm very excited to hear our speakers. Nancy Hill is our first speaker. She's a professor of education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She's also the Susan Young Murray Professor at Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. Nancy Hill studies how race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and informs parenting beliefs, practices, and children's outcomes. I could elaborate at length about Nancy's accomplishments and honors. Instead, I'll turn the table over to her and have Nancy begin our conversation about family involvement in middle school.
Okay, so what I want to talk to you, the focus of the panel is about partnerships in middle school. And I want to talk today about partnerships because it's a term and a phrase that we use a lot. It sounds good, but what do we mean and what's implied by the word? So I'm going to talk about partnerships in parental involvement during middle school, and I would like to bring 3 assumptions to the table and to discuss and to bring some data to these assumptions. But before we do that, I want to remind us where we're not. We're not in 2nd grade where parental involvement looks something like this. So whose mother will volunteer? And before the teacher can get the question out, we have Jeffy who's like, mine will. And in 2nd grade, it's much easier in that kids want their parents there. It's an honor to have their parents there. Parents come with brownies and everything like that. And parents know what to do. They know where to come. They walk into the school building. They can find the classroom. They know what to do. And so it's a much different set of issues in elementary school than it is in middle school. And I know I don't need to tell this crowd that. The 3 assumptions I'd like to talk about today are these. 1, that parents know what to do but are either uninterested or don't want to be involved. 2, that autonomy and independence that are hallmarks of adolescent development means that most teens don't want their parents involved. And 3, partnerships are feasible and desirable goals for family-school relationships. So let's talk about these one at a time. So parents know what to do but are uninterested and don't want to be involved. And so the first day I want to show you, the main question was, do parents or even we know what to do to support our children in reaching their future goals in adolescence? And I present this study almost every time I talk about parental involvement in middle school because it was really the study that made me do a whole series of studies. And I'm going to show you the findings. We followed kids from middle school through high school. We had parental involvement in 7th grade, we control for prior achievement. 8th grade school behavior is rated by the teachers, 9th grade test scores and grades, and 11th grade aspirations. And it's one of the few studies where we were able to link parental involvement to something beyond test scores, because often you'll see in the data on family school relationships, the outcome is always grades and test scores. And that makes sense for schools and school policies, which are targeting academic outcomes, but for families, school is just a means to reaching their larger goals as in adulthood of self-sufficiency and being who they want to be. And so these aspirations become much more significant for parents than they are for schools oftentimes. And so what was interesting about this study is that we looked at these relationships based on whether or not the parents had a college degree or the parents didn't have a college degree, and that seemed to matter significantly. And so the first findings are for the college-educated parents. And this is a path analysis, so you'll see, or an SEM model, so you'll see every place where you see a line is a significant relationship. So you can see there was no relationship between ethnicity and anything in the model, but there was relationships among some of the other variables. And what was interesting about this model is this nice path between parents' involvement in 7th grade, how teachers rated the children's school behavior in 8th grade, so higher involvement, lower levels of behavioral problems, lower level of behavioral problems, higher levels of achievement, and sure enough, if they're doing well in school, they want to be great things when it's time to think about post-high school planning. Beautiful model. I called my mom and I said, it worked. You got to stay involved. So the main question back at that time was, should parents still be involved? And the answer here is clearly yes. But when you looked at the parents without a college degree, and we ran the same model, and here's what it looked like. And what's interesting is you still see parental involvement. Now, interestingly, ethnicity matters. So to be a parent without a college diploma and to be African American has a bigger impact than being African American and having a college degree. So ethnicity matters among those parents who don't have a college degree. But what's interesting in this model is where you don't see the line. So we no longer see a line between 7th grade parental involvement and school behavior. It's not there. There's no line between parental involvement and school achievement. There's also no line between school achievement and what kids want to be when they grow up. There are two main findings I want you to take from here. And one is this path, that parents who were involved, these aren't the parents that don't care, or don't show up, or too disorganized to have it together, and their disorganization spills out on their kids. These are kids that do what we tell them to do. They show up at school, they come to the PTA meetings, they do all these things, but it's not having an impact on how teachers are rating their children's behavior. It's not having an impact on how they're doing in school, but it does make kids want to do great things. So they're instilling these great goals in their kids, but they're not able, with what they're doing, to be able to prepare their kids to succeed. And the most interesting non-relationship on this screen is the non-relationship between how well the kids are doing in school and their aspirations. There's no relationship between their grades and test scores and what they want to be. So you have kids whose parents don't have a college degree who are doing the things we want them to do, and you have kids that are in that group that are doing really well in school, and they don't know they should be aspiring to college or aspiring to professional careers. Or you have kids in this group that say, yeah, I'm going to college, and I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm going to do all of these things. And you look at their record, and you're like, they're not in algebra, they're not in any of these gatekeeping courses, and they're not doing well in the courses that they're doing, but they have these high goals. And both of those groups are problematic. You have kids who should aspire to great things and are prepared, they have no clue they can do it. And you have kids who are all pumped up on their aspirations, but they're going to get daunted in a few years because they're unprepared. And so what I took away from this study was this, is that parental involvement for the college-educated parents was more effective in enhancing school behavior, and that for the parents without a college degree, their involvement instilled these great goals, but it didn't prepare the kids to do well. So I had two burning questions that have served me well over the last several years. And one is, what are these college-educated parents doing that the non-college educated parents aren't? And if we could figure out what those strategies are, can we teach them? Can we replicate them? For parents who can't do them, can we figure out how to do them for the kids? And so what are these college-educated parents doing? And when I talk to my ad hoc population of friends who have college degrees, none of them were backing away from involvement in middle school. They were digging in, but they weren't showing up at school anymore. They weren't volunteering anymore. They were doing different things, and how can we account for those? And that I did a number of studies since then to answer those questions. And then the second question is, what keeps parents from being involved in productive ways? So kind of a barriers questions, and then what are they doing? So those are the two questions that have served me in my research. And I won't present that whole line of research, but if people are interested, I can point you to some articles. But when you think about parenting, as I come at this as a developmental psychologist who studies parenting, what does parenting look like in the developmental plan? And so I think of, babies are born, you have infants, and you try to raise them into adulthood. And in the middle there, you have this adolescence. And what happens is that when they're infants, the parents control everything. They regulate everything. They take care of everything. They meet their needs. And infants are very poor self-regulators. And by adulthood, we hope, right? We hope that teens move on and become self-regulators. And I haven't met a parent yet who says, I really hope my child is dependent on me for my entire life and is still in my wallet at the age of 45. Parents want their kids to go and do great things, maybe not go far, but go out of my wallet, at least out of the house perhaps. And in the middle there, you have this period of co-regulation. And I like to think of it, if you ran track and you think about a relay race, the race is won or lost where? In the handoff, right. It's won or lost in the handoff. And adolescence is the handoff, where you're trying to figure out, are they ready to hold on to the baton? Can they hold it? Will they drop it? And the parents think they're going to drop it. They hold on tighter. Then some parents are like, oh, the kids are like, oh, yeah, I can do it. And the parents are like, I don't know. And it's the struggle. So when do parents know when to let go? When do kids know they have a tight enough grip? And that's where it's won and lost. And so you have this period of co-regulation. And so for the parents you see declines in supervision, behavioral control, communication. It was interesting. It's kind of like the seesaw slide we saw at the beginning. Declines in communication, declines in unilateral authority, increases in collective discussion, challenges to parental authority and conflict, and increases in adolescents' responsibility. And so all of this happens, it's a renegotiation right in the middle of adolescence. And so what do we do to parents right in the middle of this renegotiation? We move their kids out of this elementary school into middle school. So we change the context. So parents don't even really have a good understanding of where their kids are. So parents are doing this while simultaneously getting to know a new school context. Larger, more diverse, they don't know the teachers, they don't even know who to call. All these strategies that worked in elementary school, they're trying and they're like, I don't even know who to call. And it's, they can say, okay, if I want to know about math, I can call the math teacher, I can call the science teacher. I just want to know how my kid is doing. Does he have any friends? I don't know. So part of what we've been doing to identify what works in middle schools, we started with a meta-analysis where we looked at school involvement, home involvement, and what we called academic socialization. And what we found was that the typical aspects of parental involvement that we think about, home involvement, helping with homework, school involvement, was not as significant in its relationship to achievement as other kinds of things that we called academic socialization. And what that was it's a meta-analysis, so you use the existing research and go back and kind of calculate relative strength of relationships between measures of parental involvement and measures of achievement. And the studies that looked at what we call academic socialization were doing things like communicating expectations for education. How do you understand the value and utility of education for kids? I love learning. I have been in school since I was 5. I have not left, no gaps. I love it. Most people who go into education love to learn. We're lifelong learners. How do you do that? And there are some kids that don't like it. And no amount of showing my enthusiasm is going to convince them that this is what they should do. But can I tell them how it's useful to them? Grit down and do this because it's going to let you do what you really want to do. How do we teach the utility and value of education even if we can't spark this idea of lifelong learning and loving education? So linking schoolwork to current events. How many teenagers, well, this is irrelevant to me. How do you link it to current events? How do you link it to what they're doing in school to the things that they're interested in? Kids love music. Music is math. It really is. And so how do we get them to think about math in contexts in which they're interested in learning? Fostering these educational and occupational aspirations. How do we get them to think about what they want to be when they grow up and think about a pathway? And because of tracking and building, particularly in the math and science curriculum, you can think about, well, what do I need to be doing in 7th and 8th grade that's going to open and close doors down the road? So getting them to already think about educational, occupational aspirations. And I think that's where the college-educated parents are at an advantage because they know, what that pathway looks like in 7th and 8th grade. And discussing learning strategies with children, not helping with homework directly, but how do you help them think about how to think about homework, how to be organized, and those kinds of executive function skills, and making plans for the future. And so those are the things that came out of the meta-analysis that we've been able to confirm with some later research. But, at the end of the day, most parents want to be involved. I have not met a parent who says, no, never, I don't want to be involved, they're on their own. But I do know parents who say, I don't know what to do. And parents don't know what to do to support their youth. And the middle school context makes that normative renegotiation of parenting much more challenging. So they're trying to figure out, how do I get my kids to think about some of the other kinds of things that are important to parents and not just the academic achievement aspects. And then thirdly, what we find is the most effective types of involvement are not the school-based ones that we often think about, that teachers see. They're the kinds of involvement that happens in the home and in relationships between the parent and the child. And so how do we, as in middle school, help parents learn how to do those strategies that isn't about necessarily coming to school and volunteering at school? So the second assumption is that autonomy and independence during adolescence means that teens don't want their parents involved. And we hear this again, oh my gosh, drop me off down the street. Give me money, but drop me off down the street. And so what we did, as follow-up of that first study, we did 20 focus groups with teens, parents, and teachers. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about the teen focus groups today, to figure out what parents are doing, what teachers want them to do, and what teens want for themselves. And it turns out if you close the door, feed them pizza, and get them to talk seriously about, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want your parents to do? They actually do want their parents involved. It's really interesting. So we did separate focus groups with parents, teens, and teachers, African Americans, Euro Americans, and Latinos. And they were successful. They were above grade level. So not necessarily a representative range of the school, but we wanted to know what parents were doing, whose kids are doing well. And the teachers were teachers of core subjects. And they come from a range of SES backgrounds. And before I talk about the findings, I'm going to skip the parent side of this, but it was just really interesting when we asked the teens, what do you want to be? And all the teens said they wanted to go to college. They want to do well in school. They want to. You close the door and, don't embarrass them. They're like, they get it. They get its importance, they get its significance. And then many of them mentioned specific career goals. So those are all teens. The African American teens, they want to stay out of trouble. Stay away from peers who are going to get them in trouble. They get that the peer group can derail them. The white parents weren't concerned about that. The white teens weren't concerned about. The African American and Latino teens were concerned about being in the wrong crowd, being caught up in the wrong crowd, being in the hallway where the fight broke out, and getting swept up with the group and getting in trouble when they didn't have anything to do with the situation. The Latino teens were also concerned, as I said, about staying out of trouble. They also I want to be good at sports. Soccer was very big among the Latino groups in our schools. And the Euro Americans, they were like, in addition to the things that all the teens said, they're like, I just want to be whatever I want to be. They're much more nonchalant and laissez-faire about what they wanted to be. And the Latino and African American kids were, stay out of trouble and do my work. Stay away from the bad teens. They're going to get me in trouble. I got to stay out of trouble. So teens want to understand who they are. It's part of being a teenager, and they want to think about what they can become. And contrary to popular belief, teens want parents' help. We know it from the literature, but it was really interesting to hear them say it themselves. And so African American teens, they said they wanted help selecting their classes. They wanted their parents to push them in subjects where they were having trouble. They wanted their parents to be involved in their extracurricular activities. The Latino teens wanted help finding resources, and you can see the list. And then I have a couple of, if it will work, I have a couple of sound, just so you know I didn't make this up.
I like my parents to be over-involved in my grades. I like them to be always nagging on, why are you getting such a low grade? Because it makes me feel I can do better. And it always pushes me to the last little. When I'm at the end of my rope, they kind of push me so that I get a better grade.
He doesn't want his parents to know that. But that's what he feels, he wants his parents to help. Here's another one.
I don't really like it when my mom being everywhere, especially when I'm with all of my friends. But when it comes to knowing my teachers, I think it's good because if there's a problem, then they'll have no problem talking to them about it.
The good thing is it's like your parents sort of keep you on top of things, But the bad thing is, like, in middle school, you're supposed to, like, start growing up. And with your parents by your side every 10 seconds, it doesn't really help. It's embarrassing.
Everything is embarrassing, by the way. So just so you don't think I had a squirrely set of teens, they say be involved, but please don't double check my homework. That's so elementary school. Don't lecture me about my future. There's a fine line about talking to them about their future and being lectured about their future. Stop checking and going through my book bag. We have parents across the hall eating their own pizza, talking about going through the book bags. Like, how am I ever supposed to get the flyers that come home if I don't go through the book bags, they said. And stop coming on field trips. Here we go.
My mom used to be on the PTA at elementary school, and I got so angry at her for being on the PTA because it was embarrassing that I actually got her to stop. So she tries to do all these things at school, but I don't want her to.
I don't know if this goes for everybody, but it's kind of embarrassing, like having your parents on a field trip. Because like they be embarrassing you and stuff, and you won't like talk to your friends like normally the way you would without your parents.
It turns out it's okay for the friend's parent to be on the field trip, just not their parent. I don't know how we work that out, but that would be the solution. So despite emerging autonomy and independence and decreased time with parents, parents remain the most important source of career information, and they are central to the development of educational aspirations, and we know this. And teens actually get it, and they want their parents involved in ways they want them involved, but don't show up at school or check their book bag. But the important things, they really want their parents to be involved. So assumption number 3 is that partnerships are feasible and desirable goals for family-school relationships. And there's a couple of critical reviews of the literature, just among Latinos, is that they struggle with this partnership, in part is language, and that it's not just about the translation, it's not about schools having translators, it's that having to work through a translator undermines the relationship, and relationships are essential to partnerships. When you think about what is a partnership are people who are equal, they share power, they trust each other. And for African Americans, it's this long legacy of discrimination, of separate and unequal, and current biases against African Americans and their abilities to achieve that undermine trust. And so we're asking these parents to trust when there are real valid reasons why they can't, or at least it's going to take a longer period of time to build those trusting relationships. And we don't build that into our how we think about family school engagements. You can't do it in a 15-minute parent-teacher conference. You need 15 minutes just to figure out you're really there and you can actually talk to one another. And then this idea of assuming partnerships, it marginalizes those who find that they are working against the school, who they can't trust the school, and there are reasons why they can't. And it subtly privileges those who are culturally and economically similar to the school and similar to the teachers, and it feels better. I was doing an in-service with a group of teachers, and one teacher finally raised her hand and said, yeah, I partner with people who are like me. Well, that leads to preferential treatment. How do we partner with people that aren't like us? And so as long as we use this kind of partnership language, we are subtly and really undermining our work with the very parents that we often need and want to reach. And I'm running out of time, and I see the 0 minutes over there. But I'm just going to give you the highlights, and you'll get the slides there. One is that the problem with the partnership language is that it implies tacit and implicit agreement and alignment of school structures. So if parents feel like the school doesn't get how I parent, then there's no way they can trust, and that undermines the partnership relationship. So the subtle and explicit marginalization can occur when there is an agreement or implied agreement. Secondly, it assumes a high level of trust between the families and the school personnel. And as I mentioned, with discrimination and current biases, it's not a foundation for trust. And often decisions, particularly in middle school, those curricular decisions happen before parents even know who the teachers are. So marginalization occurs when there are valid reasons for not trusting the school personnel. And thirdly, partnerships imply equal roles, expertise, and decision-making power. And that's hardly ever true. It undermines teachers' authority, training, experience. Randy Confus yesterday talked about teaching. How do we change it from the top down? When we think about parental involvement, it's from the bottom up. where did the teacher's expertise fit into that equation? How do we think about honoring that expertise? And at the same time, it invalidates parents' own knowledge and understanding of their own children. And interesting about partnerships, they can't be ended when they don't work. I know I partner with people, and when it stops working, we kind of move on. And we can't do that. Parents don't pick their teachers don't pick their kids. But we're asking them to partner in ways that don't make sense from a partnership framework. So partnerships privilege those who fit seamlessly into the school culture and marginalizes those who don't. I'm going to skip that. You'll get the slides. And so what I want to end with is, how do we know when we're succeeding? Because when I think ask teachers, and they're like, oh yeah, well, when I can talk to all the kids, parents. Well, how many kids do you see? 100? We've given them an impossible task. So how do we think about this? The level of analysis, what do we need every child's parent to do? We don't need them to all show up. We wouldn't know what to do if they did. So what do we need every parent to do? And then at the school level, what do we need some parents to do? And then we can let other parents off the hook. We don't need everyone to show up for the field trip. We just need 1 or 2 parents. So the parents who can't do it, don't judge them. Let them off the hook. And then increasing the diversity of voices heard. How do we then get representative voices rather than thinking about all voices? And at the district level, the impact of choice. We always talk about school choice. I don't know a district yet that operates on school choice. In Boston, parents have to list 12 schools. If they get their choice, they should only have to list 1, right? So I'll end with what we need to do around parental involvement is to empower parents for youth. And I'd like to send parents to the St. Anthony School of Gifted Parents, because we need to really equip parents in a new way to engage middle school and middle school youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a wonderful talk. We'll turn our attention to Charles Smith. Charles Smith is the Executive Director of the Weichert Center in Youth Program Quality, which is a division of the Forum of Youth Investment, and the Vice President for Research at the Forum. And Charles Smith conducts work developing and evaluating interventions, and will be discussing family engagement during the middle school transition, and with a particular focus on after-school programs.
Good morning. I'm going to stand up here so I can see my slides too. That helps. So I want to start by saying that was just a terrific presentation, and I planned for 15 minutes. So maybe, Nancy, at some point, since you are the expert, maybe you can have 5 minutes of my time. Because that was fascinating. When you want to work on a parent engagement or a family engagement issue, we just hired a person, a new PhD from Michigan State, and she did her research on parenting, and she started to write. I'm going to talk about, we were approached by a client to develop a family engagement intervention, and I looked in at the brief that she started to put together on the kind of the literature review background stuff, and Nancy's work was, of course, right at the top of the list. So I had these summaries of your work even before I knew you were going to be here on the panel. So it was really nice to hear you talk about your work. So the Weichert Center, where I work, is a place that works in after school. And, working with families and parents is really complicated, difficult work that's different than after-school work. It's taken us a decade to get enough of the bits figured out just working in our setting. We probably wouldn't venture into the family engagement, parent engagement realm unless we were pulled by our clients. And we're seeing this happen all over the after-school field, where after-school environments are being seen as kind of intermediary environments where families, it's a little closer to community. Often after-school environments are in community-based organizations, and places where families and parents might have a little more comfort than in schools. And so we're seeing this happen across, and again, we come from this frame where we work with a lot of different organizations. So we see our clients trying to move in this direction, and so it's been an interesting and important subject for us of late. So I'm going to talk about one particular engagement around family engagement in middle grades transitions, and work that we are doing now, starting. It's a multi-year project with the Michigan Department of Education. So my wife did a dissertation on parent involvement in Head Start, 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm really happy to see the state of the research evidence now. Then it was really difficult to figure out what we thought was going on. I read the thing, and I read a lot of the chapters and a lot of the literature, and it was really, I left that process very ambivalent. She was coming out of an anthropology department, so she was talking about a very small number of cases, but reading the literature, it was very difficult to figure out what people were measuring, what the theory was, how parent involvement had its effects. That's still complicated, I think. But this discussion has come a long ways. I was really happy to see that after being kind of re-engaged. I want to discuss this model. It's an intervention model. So this is when I was asked to join the panel, I said, I'm not really an expert on parent engagement, but we happen to be doing some work right now and I could come talk about it. And Ellen thought that was a good idea, so we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to talk about this model that's just, again, we're just starting this process of designing the intervention. I'm going to raise the issue, and I don't know how exactly important it is for this audience, but that after-school programs might be a kind of an intermediate environment where parent engagement, family engagement could occur. And then I'm going to do what I'm actually a little better at than talking about family engagement and parent engagement, talk about our design process and the way that we think about designing an intervention that is meant to be a scaled intervention. So the Michigan Department of Education has, well, actually, before I go there, let me explain just a little bit about what we do in the after-school environments that we'll be working in. So the Weichert Center has worked over the last decade to measure this stuff in out-of-school time settings. So you'll recognize the parallel to Maslow's hierarchy, and you'll see a number of, kind of domain names and then more specific kinds of micro-level practices that a staff in a learning environment would engage in. And we've worked very hard at measuring this stuff. And you'll notice a lot of parallels with a lot of the practices that were called developmentally appropriate practices for middle school age youth or for adolescents yesterday. And that parallel is not lost on us, even though we talk about it yesterday, we were talking about during the school day, after-school environments are learning environments as well. And so we measure these things and we help after-school systems change them. These are the kinds of environments that we're talking about pulling this family engagement intervention into. So already there are a number of values that bring practices that have to do with active learning, active engagement, skill building, relationships, and then some higher order thinking, planning, decision-making, reflection, kind of key practices that in Nancy's work on academic socialization, those are also part of the definition of what it means to socialize. When you get into theory about what's the active ingredient, what's changing with the kids, what are the experience and behaviors they're engaging in, the mental processes, and how does that aid child development, planning, decision-making, thinking about the future, goal setting and goal pursuit are some of those really important parts of academic socialization. And these are environments that, if it's intentionally done by an adult, are set up to do some of that. So that's why we think it's kind of a fit. And I thought it was important to say that these are how the after-school environments are structured. This is the value or the set of standards for instruction in those environments that a family engagement intervention would be put into that context. So one of our oldest clients is the Michigan Department of Education. And so they came to us and they said, right now we run a quality improvement system and a coaching intervention for 270 some after-school sites in the state. And they said we want to work on family engagement. So here's why. Basically, these sites are already doing it. There are families there. There's information about school success and performance in those settings. And those settings themselves say that they're trying to reach out to families. They may not call it parent involvement or family engagement, but it seems like the right mix of resources to think about doing this kind of work. So the next slide is the detail on where we're at in thinking about our intervention, but this is the high level. This is the slide before the slide with the small print. So there are 4 core processes. One is an intake process. We'll start this work in a pilot, and it'll be delivered as a set of best practices, right? We'll start out with a training, which is something we almost never do. We don't think training is very effective. We like to start with measurement and performance feedback, and then we'll get to training people on things at a later date. First, we want to try to get an accurate representation of what people are doing as a kind of critical first step in the adult learning process. But we'll probably start out with a training next year to talk about these issues and to recruit a set of pilot sites. That'll come this spring. And the intake process, I'm guessing, will change over time. So right now, they'll just be trying these best practices out. Eventually, this will probably become an intake kind of a process where a parent actually comes and a family signs an agreement that, yeah, I want my kids and myself to have these experiences in this after-school program. We could see it going in that direction, and there are other mechanisms that's fairly common in after-school and out-of-school time programs. So the three core processes are a process that we call school advocacy and alignment. So that's an in-school context process. It's academic socialization, and as you'll see, this is, you're going to see our kind of working definition of this term. It differs from Nancy's a bit. We're calling it that because it's convenient at this moment. Maybe after this meeting, Nancy will say, no way, you can't call it that. But that happens in the after-school setting, and then school community connections, because after-school settings are really connected to other community organizations and other activities. And, as we know, Jackie Eccles was here yesterday. Folks who've worked on the Maddox data, I think, are in Tampa this week presenting the age 30 findings of activity participation in 11th grade for vulnerable youth, right? So we know that being connected to school and community activities is a protective factor. And after-school programs could help middle schoolers be set up by high school to be involved in sports and other activities. So these are the three kind of core processes that the intervention is made up of. And here's the slide with the smaller writing, and I'm just going to take a second to go through each box. The outputs, this is just the way we like to think. There's a behavior, an adult behavior or a process that we can name, you could see, you could count, and then there's the result. That's not necessarily a measure of child development, but it's the result. So we like to really spell out the small steps. So this is a small step. So in the school advocacy and alignment there, we're referring to practices like the way after-school staff work with parents and family members. And again, for the Michigan Department of Education, the word parent was not what they were after. They were concerned that a lot of kids, it's not the parent who's the helping adult. And so they want to make room for other people in the family, other adults, to be the helping or supporting adult, and so they want to call it family engagement. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, Nancy, at some point, whether you think that kind of substitution is a good working theory. So anyways, monitoring in the school. Can I help parents? E-grades, right? Schools have online systems with daily homework reported. Now, not all parents, I'm one of them, can figure out how to get into those systems. After-school programs are open until 6:30 or 7. It's a time when parents can actually walk in the building and see the child. And often the behavior is the parents do walk into the building and pick up the kids. So it's a way they could help parents understand how kids are doing in school and advocate or monitor that performance. Also, the after-school staff themselves in many programs, in many school-based programs, are employed all day. They work in the school before they do the after-school program. They're there. They could, for a smaller group of kids, they could be doing academic support, academic monitoring, and advocacy in the school. And then as school staff and after-school staff talk to each other, you just get more time on content, but done after-school style, right? The active learning approach, the after-school standards for instruction are used to deliver content that works in the school day, so you're getting more time on content. The secondary, academic socialization, what our client at the Department of Education said, they had seen a lot of really great youth empowerment programs in middle school. And in fact, a couple of members of our state board of education had gone out and seen a couple of those programs, and it had a big impact on them. The kids literally running the program, making decisions, evaluating the work that was being done at the end of the day. And it made a big impact on them. So they came and they said, we want family engagement. We know that transitions into and out of middle school are really important, and we want youth empowerment. And by the way, we really like youth-led conferences. So we said, hey, we can probably work with that. So that's where this second box comes from. Work on career education and pathways, especially in-district pathways. The discussion about what it takes in our district to move through middle school and into high school, and from high school to whatever the local higher ed post-secondary structure is, that's a local discussion in many important ways. And local actors are the ones who need to be explaining it to kids, school system folks. So this is an opportunity for that to happen. A youth-led conference, again, over time, this could get paired with, we have a lot of after-school staff who go to parent-teacher conferences. It could get paired with school performance. At this point, we're not imagining that. But a youth-led conference, so at the beginning, the kids talk about career aspirations and goals with parents, wherever that discussion is, and then they work on it over the course of a semester, and then at the end, there's a youth-led conference about where their thinking ended up in terms of careers, goals, education pathways, and also skills assessment. We want the kids to self-assess. So we've been working with other partners in Chicago to develop a self-assessment, and I'll show you an example of it here at the end, where kids can kind of look at we call it the 21st century skills, right? There's lots of names for these skills. Planning, decision-making, self-regulation, defined in a way that, a normal human can understand, with some kind of frequency or count beside it, and the kids can self-evaluate. They don't have to work on the whole thing. They can work on a couple. It generates great conversations between adolescents and adults. So that's academic socialization, and the last part is community connection. So opportunities for school staff, after-school staff, and parents to talk. They might talk about many things having to do with child success in school. Those might become more directive kinds of things, like a parent education program. They may just be opportunities to talk, but that would be, it's a thing we can count. It's connectivity, linking these settings. And then the last is just, in middle school, out-of-school time programs, especially in school, should be linking the older middle schools up with activities for high school. They should be helping them be introduced to sports they want to be involved with clubs both in the school and out-of-school time. It's great. It's great for kids. There's a lot of evidence of that, and a lot of kids just don't know. They're not exposed to the opportunities to be, to start the tennis team in high school. And while, we have a lot of, highly competitive high schools where it's basically semi-pro status to be on the sports team, there are many other high schools where it's not. And you can start a sport in your freshman year or your sophomore year. So this is the basic concept of again, this is kind of like a best practices model at this point. So when we think about that, and that's about as far as we are in the thinking on that, what are the design principles? Is we want to try to take an intervention out and take it to scale in a whole bunch of sites and programs. And this will not be just for Michigan. This would be for our work is used in about 3,000 after-school sites that we directly contract with across the country. When we take it out, how do we think about taking this out as something that can be scaled? So the first criterion for us is that it's rooted in a positive youth development model. Like the pyramid I showed you, that's one way of talking about positive youth development, especially the behaviors of adults that promote it. There are many ways to talk about it. We think it's important to talk about the experiential supports to the kids that come from the families, but also the ability to substitute. If the family can't be there, we still want the kids to go through the experience. After-school programs serve a very important substitutional purpose in the sense that they can replace, we hope, experiences that are not happening in school or in some cases in the home setting. So as we set up a set of experiences for kids to talk about, become future-oriented basically in middle school, substitution is really an important part of that discussion. We think about multiple level systems. This is work that happens at the point of service between an adult and a child. However, if the manager of that building and the administrator for that funding stream are not in complete agreement that should be happening, it's probably not worth doing because it'll go away as soon as the staff leaves. We want systems alignment with any intervention that goes out. We want to be able to identify outcomes, which I'll talk about last. We need to think about feasibility, and we have to specify the core experiences. What are the active ingredients? What are the kids' experience that we think promotes developmental change? The pathways to that experience can be very different. You don't have to follow the same 15 steps to get to the core child experience that's really important. And while, that takes a lot of research and understanding to figure out what that is, we got to start with some guesstimates so we can describe it. So I'm going to go through a couple slides that have to do with other aspects of feasibility, or these aspects of feasibility. So let's talk about, these other design principles. So feasibility, this is the last slide I want to spend a little bit of time on. So this is data from 3,000 kids in 125 programs in the state of Oklahoma, their 21st century system. And so we asked them a bunch of questions that if you look on the left-hand side, this is the intervention model that I just suggested. These are the shortened items that we asked either managers, frontline staff, parents, or kids. So different data sources. And it's all aggregated up, right? There's all kinds of problems with this in a measurement sense, but it's all aggregated up. And this is the percent of sites scoring high, saying they do this for some or all children. And so three-way communication with parents and teachers, about 57% of sites in Oklahoma say they do it. Most of the sites say that they know a lot about what happens in the school day. The after-school staff do. A little over half receive student progress reports. High numbers know what's happening week to week in terms of curriculum, and about 2/3 talk with with teachers. So after-school programs in Oklahoma, and in our experience elsewhere, even community-based programs that are not in school sites, are highly connected with school performance data. They know what kids are doing in schools. In the socialization part, we don't have items about that, but we did ask if, the nature of the project. So are kids involved in group projects over 5 sessions, and does the task complexity increase over time? That's like a goal-setting process. If you're thinking about your career, you have an early set of goals, you go through maybe a careers curriculum or some discussion information, you end up with a more complex set of goals that takes several sessions, and then you talk to your parents about it. So those kinds of behaviors are happening, unfortunately, not in that many, but a third to a half of programs. And then the school community connections, there are a lot of school community connections. Importantly, when we take these, we've been doing a bunch of data analysis that I decided not to present, but when we create scales out of all these measures, and we put them in clusters, and we profile them using cluster analysis, so we get a kind of an all low, which is about 30% of the sites, and an all high, which is about 18 or 20% of the sites. We can then use those variables to look at differences in other variables. And basically all the child outcome measures, academic efficacy, social emotional learning, all the child well-being measures that we have in this data file, there are statistically significant differences between the high and the low. So there's, this is cross-sectional data, but it gives us a first look. Another important part is to specify the core experiences. So these are the kinds of experiences that we want kids to have, or that when we talk with our client, they want kids to have. They want the kids to have increased talk about school expectations and performance at home and in after school. They want the kids to know that there's more advocacy or monitoring going on during school. And again, more time on content. The academic socialization part is, kids are getting introduced to skill concepts, and they're being able to do some self-assessment, some self-reflection, which is, it works with middle schoolers, better with older middle schoolers. They do some goal thinking about careers and local district pathways. And then there's this youth-led conference concept. And then, of course, exposure to options for sports and clubs in high school. This is just to say that this is data from their improvement plans. Every one of those sites, we measure stuff for them, and we engage into a quality improvement process, and we're seeing family-related, parent-related issues emerge all over the place on these program improvement plans that after-school providers create. So in about 30% of the sites, there were explicit goals focused on family engagement. Interestingly, these are really kind of school-based, home-based goals. They're not the deeper socialization kind of discussion that Nancy's been talking about and that this intervention is really going to try to focus on. So there are lots of problems for us, outcomes. It's really complicated. I'm at 0 minutes. I'm not going to go into this part, but I will show you some interesting pathways. So we thought about, how do the effects happen? And so there's a main effects model where this is very simple thinking, right? There are parents, they have effects on kids. There are schools, they have effects on kids. And there are after-school programs, and they have effect on kids. And as the kid moves through time, developmental change occurs. So it gets really complicated, though, because these are all settings that have their own dynamics within setting. And it gets very complex to start to think through what are the active pathways of change. One interesting one is after-school staff advocating for monitoring performance of kids during the school day having an effect on the effect between school staff and kids. And in our discussions with our team and with our folks at Department of Ed, they thought this was a really important effect pathway. Another one was a reciprocal effect where the kids can help to socialize the parents. Kids can help to do academic socialization with parents in a youth-led conference. And that was really what our clients at the Department of Education had in mind when they wanted the kids to talk to the parents about what they're learning and what they want to do. And then finally, I won't talk about that. So I was going to, just to go through, these are a set of examples. So if you see within these three, this stuff is happening all over the place. After-school programs, school day data is being driven at after-school programs in very sophisticated ways. So this is a representation from the city of Nashville. There's city-county consolidation. And this is just to say that it's really happening daily. Daily information about child performance in school, certainly weekly, flows into the Nashville after-zone programs so that after-school staff know what's going on with the kids in terms of behavior and performance that week. So real-time information, the schools know the most about the kids of most of the people who work with them. The teachers know a lot. For all the problems that represents, teachers know a lot. And so real-time data is being pushed at after-school programs as an environment that can be concerned with school success. This is the 21st century skills assessment we were talking about. These are just a couple of examples here, but you can see the kinds of, you can understand this, and these are the kinds of dimensions of skill that we'd be talking about with middle school kids. This is from work in Chicago that is done by the Chicago YMCA and the Chicago Public Schools. And I think I'll leave it with that. I'll just bounce back to this one, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Charles. I'll now be introducing Otha Thornton. Otha is the president-elect of the National PTA and has been involved in the PTA organization for a very long time in a variety of different roles. Also, Otha is now the senior operations analyst with General Dynamics in Fort Stewart, Georgia, and he's a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel and served in the combat operations during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Otha is going to be talking to us from the perspective of the PTA about middle school and be describing the role of the PTA in relation to that.
Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank the University of Virginia and Sarah for having me here and the fellow panelists. I got in this morning at about 2 o'clock. We had some weather delays, but I'm very happy to be here. And hopefully we can have some good times. I always do a disclaimer because I tell people I'm a non-traditional PTA type. Retired military, probably the first retired military in the history of the organization, so it's a different world as we work with the organization. First of all, just a quick overview of PTA. I want to make sure I get everything in on time here. We were founded in 1897. We're the oldest child advocacy organization in the United States. Our president referred to this as the sleeping giant. With a lot of the things that we're doing for the country. We have about 5 million members in the 50 states, and also we have 4 congresses outside of the United States in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Asia, and Europe. And we probably contribute, as according to the IRS, about $2 billion a year worth of volunteer hours to the United States. So it's very important. We have a very long history in PTA of influencing federal policy and promoting the education, health, and welfare of our kids, somewhere around 70 million in the United States. Some of the federal policies and things that we've brought forward as initiatives over the years include kindergartens in the early 1900s, child labor laws, juvenile justice, school lunch programs. Even recently, within the last couple of years, we worked with the current administration. We're a nonpartisan organization, but we worked with the administration in getting a $2 billion overhaul on our school lunch programs that went into effect this past school year. So again, we're doing very well continuing that. As I talk, you can hone in this on middle schools as we talk, but it's relative across the board, some of the techniques and procedures and things that we use. Our priorities, as far as PTA is concerned, first, family engagement and education, opportunities and equity for all children, child health, and as far as effective family engagement, here are the 3 components that we're going to talk about today as we move forward. One of our partners that we work with in family engagement currently is the National Family School and Community Working Group. And again, it's a research-based organization which we work to ensure that we're doing this at every level. First of all, what is effective family engagement? It's a shared responsibility. I often tell parents that education begins at home. You know, if you have a child, it's our responsibility. And I want us to, with school systems, I understand the history of education. And I always say it's the difference between educating a mind and training a mind. In educating a mind, you're teaching a child how to think. And in training a mind, you're teaching them what to think. So in our school systems, as we go through all this modern day reform, it's very important that we the difference between the two. And it's so important, and the educators out here, we know that, with the history of our country and our education system from the perspective of the research that we've done, if a child hasn't gotten their reading and things in order by third grade, they're pretty much behind as they continue through their academic career. So that's very important. We're working with Head Start and early childhood programs so that by the time they get to the middle school, that they're equipped to be successful. So that's very important. And also, it's integrated across the context. When we say that, family engagement should be at every level, wherever a child is learning, whether it's in a faith-based area, community-based area. It's very important that the parent is involved in that learning. From a faith-based perspective, and we're a non-secular organization also, but we worked with the White House faith-based initiatives where in schools we're trying to encourage some of the faith organizations to do summer programs, to use those vans and vehicles they have during the summer to transport our kids to libraries and things for reading. And literacy is a very, very big push in that particular area. Middle school years are vulnerable times for children, socially, emotionally, physically, and intellectually. I'm going to go to the next slide here. In the middle school, kids are dealing with hormones. They're dealing with their identities. I have two kids. I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. So, going through those stages with those kids and working with kids is very important that we help them to navigate through these things during those middle school years as they move forward. My wife is also an educator, so she's my fact checker also. Programs and interventions that engage our families in supporting their children's learning at home are linked to higher student achievement. Family involvement at home appears to have the greatest effect on student achievement. And as you've heard the other panelists talk this morning, basically after elementary school, that weans off. But that's one of the things that we're making a big focus on, and I'll talk about some practical things that we're doing to keep parents more engaged at the middle school level and high school level as we move forward. Why is family engagement important? No matter how high the family income or background may be, students with involved parents are more likely to have better social skills. Just that interaction where they're reading to their children, pass their classes. As I talk to families and caregivers of children, I talk about one of the things. I didn't come from a wealthy household. I came from a working class family and a lower socioeconomic class family. But every night at dinner, my mom would ask, how was school today? What are you doing? Just that engagement. And she could not get out to school as often as she would like. But the bottom line is just that engagement at home. Attend school regularly, just keeping up and keeping accountability with your children. They earn higher grades and test scores. So it's very important in these particular areas. And most of them, they will graduate and go into post-secondary education. And I'll say this a couple of times. One of the things as a national leader in education, I said when our kids graduate from school, we want them to be college or career ready, period. Because everyone's not going to college, and we understand that. We encourage it, the highest of education, but we know that we're realistic, and we just want to make sure that a child has options once they graduate. Some of the programs we will talk about, particularly at middle school areas, I'm sure you're all familiar with, AVIT. Advancement via Individual Determination is a great program. My wife was a program manager for AVIT, which helps kids at middle school and high school navigate to success and have those necessary skills to do well. Another high-end program, I would call it, is the International Baccalaureate program, the middle years. And that's a very rigorous course that basically the framework of the International Baccalaureate program is training them to be world leaders and have a world perspective in education, which is very important in our global economy today. Effective family engagement improves achievement through instructional guidance, student-centered learning climate, professional capacity, and parent-school community ties. Now, I want to talk about, and then I think most importantly, is principal leadership as a driver for change. I heard some of our panelists talk about data. I think data-driven systems are critical because at middle school level or any school level, having that longitudinal data, being able to say, this is where this child is located. And I think that's one of the positive things that came out of the No Child Left Behind, disaggregating data and forcing people to look at the different demographic groups. And when I've lived in about 6 states during my military career, and some of the states like Maryland, who's ranked as one of the top states in the country, is one of those states that really use that longitudinal data, and it really has made a big difference in our school systems. And no matter what field you're in, I've worked in academia, I've worked in corporate America, military, and now PTA. Leadership is the most important thing in every organization because the leader sets the vision and sort of works with this organization in a collaborative effort to make a difference in setting the course for success. I want to talk about, here's some of the ways that we implement at the middle school level and across the board, the 6 standards that in some states we've actually taken these standards and they've been adopted by school boards of education, which is making a big difference. Welcome to all families. Again, we talked about the principal leadership, and as far as PTA is concerned, one of the things that we're beginning to focus in on more with our leaders is understanding the importance of their identity, culture, and environment they're working in. It's very important in understanding those things as a leader to make a difference. Quick story, I have 10 minutes. When I moved from Europe, I lived in Germany from 2002 to 2005. And I moved to Fort Meade, Maryland. First PTA meeting I went to there, I was in country for about 2 months. I got here in June, first PTA meeting in August. I showed up to the meeting, and there were 2,000 students in the school, but we had 7 parents at the PTA meeting. And I was just getting off work, so I had on my uniform, and the post commander, who had a PhD from UCLA, he was at the meeting also. So the president said, well, we didn't have enough parents this year to get enough officers, so we need officers for this year. So the post commander looked over at me and said, Thornton, what are we going to do about this? And I said, sir, I just got in country. And he looked at me again and said, what are we going to do about this? Okay, so I became vice president of the Meade High School PTA. So after that, everyone cleared the room, and it was just the president and I sitting there, and I said, ma'am, I said, tonight you had a 2.5-hour meeting. There was no agenda. I said, people don't come to meetings like that. I mean, you have working parents. We need to get to it. I said, so if I can build an agenda for you, you approve the agenda, and I make sure it gets to all the parents through our announcement systems and emails. Will that work for you? She said, yes. I said, okay. So that's what we did. And then we surveyed the parents. You can do this at middle school level. We surveyed the parents, and everyone doesn't have email, I got it. But we did surveys, we did paper surveys, email surveys to say, what can we do for you? How can we make your school better? And I think that's a critical piece in any school, in a middle school, to set goals. I mean, the school has the goals. I mean, it's required. But getting the parents to give them that input and buy-in into their school. And you hear me say this a couple of times. One of the things I tell parents around the country, I say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I said, middle school, people are making decisions and choices about your child because you're not at the table, okay? So that's very critical, and you'll hear me talk about that a little bit later on as we move forward. Here are our 6 standards, so 6 standards that we encourage, and I'll give you some practical things as we move through these particular standards. Welcoming all families, communicating effectively, supporting student success, speaking up for every child, sharing power, and collaborating with the community. So those are the 6 basic things that as PTA we really work hard at making a difference in that particular area. Let's start with goal 1. Standard 1, creating a climate that welcomes all families. That's developing personal relationships, creating a family-friendly atmosphere, and providing opportunities for volunteering. And again, organized volunteering. One of the things we're doing to get more male involvement in schools, we partnered with Watchdogs and some other all-pro dads with Tony Dungy to get more men involved, because psychologically you have to approach different genders and different cultures different ways. So with men, I mean, like I said, my wife would say, Dad, my wife would say, look, I need you to go here and do A, B, and C. And that's how I have to communicate with them. So, and so Watchdogs and All Pro Dads, they have the type programs where, okay, we want you to come to the school. When you come, we would like A, B, C, and D. And it really makes a difference, and we're seeing that pick up in male involvement. Second, building a respectful, inclusive school community. Respect all families, remove economic obstacles, and ensure accessible programming. Now, again, as leaders, especially in the education field, you have to understand and study cultures and identities, because the things that we do make a difference in understanding that. And hopefully, because in academia, as we hear things about social constructs, race, class, all those things are social constructs, but we need to really work hard at transcending those things, but understanding, because one size does not fit all, and we have to keep that in mind. Number 2, I got about 5 minutes. Number 2, communicating effectively. Sharing information between schools and families. We've done a lot of work, and we're doing a lot of further work in increasing the communication. Listservs, which is a common thing. We're doing academia, but in other areas, we're trying to, in the community, building those listservs to really make a difference. The robocalls, every which way, communicating, in many ways to reach out. Texting programs to send out messages to parents, but that's very important. And also eliminating language barriers and aligning with cultural norms. Some units, and I talked to one unit in one of our major states, they sent a person to a Spanish-speaking meeting that didn't speak Spanish. I said, was that smart? I said, come on, that is the reality. So, you work and do what you need to do to reach out, because they are our children, and you deal with the audience that you have. Okay? Next slide. Supporting student success. We talked about data, very important in your systems on the data. Supporting, next one. Supporting learning by engaging your families. Use test results to provide specific ways to support learning at home. And there are programs in the longitudinal data that we have that parents have access to, that to show where their kids stand in relationship to their classes and their school systems, and offers them an opportunity to provide supplemental data. Number 4, speaking up for every child. Again, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we're trying to get people involved in this particular thing. And what we're doing at middle schools around the country and other schools, we are telling parents, here's the way that you can advocate for your child and other children. Okay, there's this, school councils where you can sit in with the principal and administrators when they make decisions, and it's required by law, okay? So really getting involved in that, going to the school board meetings to listen to what's going on and giving the good news of your school and what's going on in your school, and also just learning the decisions that are being made that are affecting your particular, your child and other children there. Sharing power, that's a tough one. People do not want to share power. And that's very important that we want to empower people, okay? But education is a very powerful tool. When you train a mind to what to do, I mean, that's easy. But when you train a mind how to think, that's very important. And we want people to have that opportunity, strengthen that voice through educating them on how the system works and to make things better for all kids. Building family, social, and political connections. And PTA, ever since almost the beginning of PTA, we've had a great relationship between the White House and Congress. And every year we usually do, in March, as a matter of fact, March 12th through 14th, we bring about 200 folks in from around the country, schedule appointments with their senators and congressmen to talk about education policy. So we've been at the table, and we want to continue that as we move forward. Okay. Connecting the school with community resources. Get your middle schools involved with the business community and the faith-based community. That is critical. Okay. It's very critical that we get those linked in. And the way I approach the business community is that if you have a bad education system, it affects your economy. Corporations, the military, we make decisions on your community based upon your education system. So you need good middle schools, which makes good high schools as we move forward and go forth. Okay, standard 6. Okay. This will be in the slide packet, but just talking about our family school partnerships and things that we do. Urban Family Engagement Network. This is a program that we started in around 10 cities around the country. I've worked in Atlanta and Baltimore working with this program, and Chicago, where we have family institutes, back-to-school events, and also a big literacy program that I talked about. And this program has been very, very successful, and this is on our website for more information. But thank you all for your time, and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Okay, these are wonderful talks, and we're ready for a conversation. So I welcome your questions. I think there's a microphone that will be headed over there. And if you could introduce yourself first, that would be great.
Good morning. I'm Joe Mahoney from the School of Education, University of California, Irvine. This is a great panel. I wish I was on it so I could say I was on a great panel. Thank you so much. My question is for Charles, because Charles is one of my heroes in the after-school field, and I've learned a lot from him, and I hope to learn more. So, are you familiar with Gil Nome's continuum of connection between school and after school, where he views the relation it ranges from no connection whatsoever to completely integrated. And you talked about schools providing data to these after-school programs, and I'm sort of wondering what happens to that data. Do they actually use it, and does it depend on the degree of connection that they have? So that's one question. Of course, there's got to be a second part to the question. Then there are different types of programs. Some are situated within schools and some are community-based organizations. And do you think that it would make a difference in terms of how that data might be used if it's a community-based organization, that might have a less direct connection to the schools? And I don't know if you can answer this at this point in your study, but you know why I'm asking, because we're very interested in the use of research and after-school programs. So any thought that you have would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So I think that it's a very heterogeneous world out there. There's lots of, it just depends on the city and the county and the state system that the setting is set in. When we try to measure alignment with schools, we ask about information flow. So that's just information flows from school to after school. We ask about joint planning, so that people actually meet and talk and about kids, specific kids, and curriculum. And then we talk about three-way relationships that include families. And it's just really widely varied how both frontline staff and managers answer the extent to which they do that. And it's really widely varied across both school-based, like 21st Century, where there's an explicit school success goal, and community-based organizations, so that in some places like Palm Beach County, the community-based organizations not in schools are more connected to school day information and school day processes in some cases than the school-based settings are, because they've been working on it. So it just depends. And our concern is always just that after school not just become more school. So, so there's just a lot of variation.
Hello. Hello. My name is Amir Francois. I'm a third-year doctoral student at the Curry School in Applied Developmental Science. Great panel. I guess my question is for all the panelists. I'm interested in cultural competence and kind of cultural fluency, and for institutional representatives, either after school or in the school, to have, where do you see them getting the skills? Do you see them finding people that already have the skills and that's who's facilitating these partnerships? Or do you see actual training or skill building that goes on, or is it an iterative process? I would, love to hear what you guys think.
When you think about cultural competency in the school, and I think that's part of why when I talked about the marginalization that can happen, because we know when there are broad cultural strokes that don't fit, but culture shapes how people think from the very beginning, how they engage information, the role of language in shaping thought. So does language and speaking out loud, and we always, kids are engaged when they raise their hand and talk. Well, that's very Western, very Socratic, very American. Language and other cultures interfere with thinking. So to talk it through, the activity of talking will undermine the thinking. But our school curriculum is based on a Socratic model with a certain way of thinking. And so part of how we think about cultural competency is understanding what those biases are that are in our curriculum. So often we think of schools as somehow objective, but how we measure, how we think about curriculum, all of that is culturally embedded because we are socializing as part of education people into American society, or whatever it is that are our outcomes, are shaping the kind of cultural competency, not around cultural values or ethnicity. I'm talking about broad cultural American culture. And so until we acknowledge the cultural assumptions that are in our school curriculum, it becomes very hard to think about cultural competency. And I think that's why we have so much trouble around issues of diversity training, because we're often trying to give people a list of what, here's the other culture, and here's what you should know about them. And that works right up until the moment someone from that other culture sits down in front of you. And then they become stereotypes, which is worse than knowing nothing at all, right? And so how we think about cultural competency is often trying to understand what our own biases and assumptions are, so I can know what, the cultural values and assumptions, they serve us well. They make us be able to do things automatically and free up our mind for other things. But I think understanding what those assumptions are and naming them will help us be more empathic in our interactions with other families or people from other backgrounds. But I think it starts with understanding what are those cultural assumptions.
Cultural competency,
I've been to 25 countries, lived in 3, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Hispanic cultures. And I really push that a lot, particularly on leadership. And as you heard me, I talked about identity, culture, and environment. And we really have to understand that, like I said, the cultural assumptions that people make about people. And we, race, class, all those things are social constructs. And as leaders, educational leaders, you have to understand that. I mean, I have to understand my biases and go beyond. I'll give you an example. When I talk to people around the world, I've worked with, trained some Egyptians before, Egyptian officers, and when you talk and work with them, they're proud of Egypt, but you ask them average, I won't stereotype, but where is Egypt? And the common answer you hear is the Middle East. No, Egypt is in Africa. So it's so many things like that, just small, the way we train people's mind because of history is very important. Or where are the oldest fossils in the world found? Africa by Dr. L.S.B. Leakey. But our kids are not taught that, and sometimes that's purposeful. And the contributions that the different cultures and people around the world have made. So that's very important to know that and know who you are and know your identity. And culture is so important. When I spent time in France, the importance, the French and their culture. I worked for 2 presidents, and I watched a French president that was fluent in English talk to one of our presidents in French, and then talk to Dr. Condoleezza Rice in English, because of the importance of culture and cultural competence.
I would just say that we deal with this issue a lot in articulating standards for instruction. So people say, what about, does this work for everybody? And, there are lots of ways into that conversation. When we've asked people, especially in the Northwest, in Seattle and Portland, we've worked on a specific project where we've asked after-school staff, how would you make this, that pyramid is an example, how would you make this more culturally relevant? And, their responses tend to be more on the kind of proactive multiculturalism frame, kind of like, the Canadians think about it, where inclusion is the point, and here's all the steps we can take to keep a setting open. And that tends to be what the responses come back to us about how to frame quality in a cross-cultural context. And then the other problem is, bureaucracies can just be really unfriendly to people, period. So when you come into a public institution and you get a really unfriendly, there's not even an unfriendly welcome, there's no welcome. It's made fairly clear that you're not wanted there. That's just a general problem too. So I think those things go hand in hand. And in after school, part of the claim is that, and I think this is true in some places and less true in others, but you get more, the workforce is more local. You're likely to, if you're going to look for an instructor in after school who shares cultural norms and experiences with the kids who come in, I think there's a widespread belief that after school is an institutional setting that offers that as a strength. Not always true, of course.
Panel. Good evening, panel. Thank you guys for a great presentation. My name is Tyrus Lyles, Principal, Benford Middle School in Richmond City Public Schools. I wanted to address a question to Dr. Hill. It was a great presentation on trying to get parents into the school and get them involved, especially during school years. And we know there's a lot of barriers. For me, being a principal, we do the things, we go to the doors, we even have the dinners, and you all know it's great, but it doesn't necessarily get our parents in. So have you seen a model or something that works to get them in, especially when you're talking about an urban school division? And I don't want to say the apathy, but getting parents to really become entrenched into the school and trust the school in their neighborhood that they are going to educate their students and actually give the students what they need.
I think I can't say I have a program in my pocket that I can hand you that works. But when you think about your goal of, how do we get parents to come into the school, particularly in middle school, is figuring out, well, what is it that we want to accomplish while they're there? Why is that the best way to use your family engagement literature? And as I kind of think about what are the kind of goals that are achievable, when we did focus groups with our teachers, the teachers who were still excited about family engagement still had the goal, I want to have a positive relationship with the parents of all the students that I see. I'm like, well, how many students do you see in a day? 100. They cannot do that. We've given them an impossible task. So then they dial back. Well, I want to make sure that if I have to call a parent because their kid's in trouble, I want to have had a positive first experience before I have to call the second time. And you can't always guess who these kids are you're going to have to call. And so again, we've given them a task that they don't have the time or energy to do. And then what happens over time, when you give people goals that they can't achieve, they either have to devalue the goal or they have to devalue their ability and efficacy to meet the goal. And so when we say, how do we get more parents in, how many parents would have to show up before you said, we've done it, we've arrived? And my argument from my data in middle school is that the volunteering and showing up if I were a parent and I had limited amount of time, and I'm a parent with limited amount of time who has a 14-year-old at home, I know from my data that showing up at school and volunteering isn't going to impact her achievement as much as giving her some skills at home and teaching her how to think about her work and how does this apply to what you're learning but how do we help parents do those kinds of things? And that's where our research is now, is trying to figure out how do we equip parents to be engaged in ways that are most impactful. And I think we do need parents to volunteer in school. Schools can't run without the parent volunteers. So you figure out how many parents do you need and what do you need them to be doing? And then you can let the other parents off the hook. It was interesting, we were coming through our focus groups with teachers, and our middle school teachers were quick to judge kids' parents because they didn't show up. Well, they need to show an interest. We had one parent said, well, they just need to spend a day here. I mean, I don't know a parent who could spend a day there. And so we're judging them on this elementary school model when we know that showing up in school isn't necessarily the most effective way. And I think why it works in elementary school is when parents volunteer in elementary school, the kids want them there. They're volunteering in the classrooms where their kids are, so they see how the instruction, and they're building a relationship with that teacher, and there's one teacher with whom to build the relationship. When they volunteer and show up in middle school, they're much less likely to be in the classrooms with their kids and building those relationships. So the kind of capital that happens around showing up in school isn't the same, and I think that's why it doesn't work. So really thinking about what do we want to accomplish? What do we need every parent to do? And then what do we need some parents to do? And among the some parents, how do we get a diverse representation of voices? I mean, in my experience with the PTAs, there are a couple of parents that wield all the power, and if I'm not in favor, I get no information. So how do you think about who are the constituencies in your school and spend your energy around how do we inform the constituencies? Do you need parents that reflect every community or every bus route or ethnic group or language group? And how do we think more strategically about communicating information between the schools and the home so that parents can do more of the academic socialization, which we know is more effective?
We're working very hard on that power sharing now.
I didn't say all of PTA. I just know there are a couple of parents in every one that seem to have that.
Oh, I agree, ma'am. I keep it real.
The time, so if you can be very brief in the responses, then we'll. Right, great.
Bottom line is a model. In 2005, when we arrived at Meade High School, what we did, we had 20 parents. Once I was voluntold to be vice president, we organized, I got my parents together. I got about 5 or 6 parents. We built a script inviting parents. We would call the parents. Over the course of 18 months, we were able to build up to 400 parents. And any given PTA member, we will have 70 to 80 parents at the meeting. But we got their needs. What are your needs? What do you want to see? And that's where we made a difference. And after every PTA meeting or any major thing that we had, via email, via phone calls. We didn't inundate parents with email and phone calls, but that really made a difference, and parents felt engaged and involved. Even with the Board of Education, we got top-end programs in our school. It's one of the top high schools in the country last year, and it's for the last couple of years, because we were able to get programs and make a difference. And I'll talk to you more about that if you're interested.
So I've been rethinking some results we've had that I've been very interested in for a long time, which is that, and it came out of what you were talking about, but also connects to your question, which is when we ask parents about their involvement in school and teachers about parental involvement in school, we saw this divergence when you hit middle school, particularly for the parents of the kids who were trouble. And essentially the kids who are trouble, the parents' involvement doesn't agree with the teachers. Parents say they're involved, the teachers say they aren't. And what we think is going on there is it isn't counted as involvement if you come up to school because you're trying to work on an IEP or you're trying to figure out what to do about your child's not getting their homework done or something like that. It's counted if you come help monitor a school trip or bring materials to help with. That's our guess. But I'm thinking that it's actually deeper than that, which is that we don't have a model for how parents and teachers of kids having trouble should interact. And I was taken by your comment of at least their second step, if they can't have great relationships with everybody, is they want to be able to, when they have to approach a parent of a child who's having trouble, have some positive exchange beforehand. And it seems like there might be an idea here that is to diverge training for teachers about how do you work with the parents of the kids you think are more at risk. And then that's different than do you have parents come up and have parent meetings and have parent communication. And that we may have, until now, been sort of treating parents as though they're a big, similar, homogenous mass of people who need one thing. So.
I think that's right. In our data, that it's bimodal distribution. The parents whose kids are doing well are doing a lot of the academic socialization, and the parents of kids who are not doing well are doing a lot of similar sounding things to different ends, to different purposes, and for different reasons.
And it is 10:40, and I think we're supposed to take a break and then rejoin here at 10:45. Okay, great.
I'm sorry to prolong the break.
No, go ahead.
But I just want to go back to your point, and I want to make sure that we were clear. I get the idea behind the volunteerism, but I think it's even more than that. We're talking about parents coming in and being concerned, especially when you're talking about, as you said, the students that are failing, that are causing some of the trouble. And it's not about the volunteers. I think we do get the volunteers, but we also need to figure out a way or some model that we can get them in when we need them for the trouble situations that are going on. And I think that's where we're kind of losing that. The volunteerism is great, and we love those that come in, but when we really need the ones that are not coming in so we can address those issues and figure out how we can connect the community, of course, with the school so that everybody wins. Because you have some parents, they're there when the door opens and when the door closes, and then you have those ones that we need to get in, but it's just there's something that we can't do even if you sometimes send something out, somebody to come pick them up and bring them in. We still can't get them in. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I hope that that was kind of clear in the question.
We have a paper that we've done on barriers and solutions from the focus group data. It's in revision, but I'd be happy to share some of those ideas offline.
Thank you.
I think it's time that we take a break. Is that, if you would like to talk to the panelists, why don't we gather up here and then we can have some further conversation. I saw some additional questions, and that way you can gather here.